Okay, everyone. So hello and welcome to today's online grants clinic from the Heritage Council. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Valerie Kelly and I am the Community and Public Engagement Officer. And today with my colleague Amanda Ryan, our grants officer, we will be advising you on best practice in applying for the 2022 Heritage Capacity Fund. So before we get started, there is a little bit of housekeeping that we need to get through. As I'm sure you've realized by now, you are all muted. And that's just so that we don't get feedback with a load of different mics on at once. We wouldn't be able to hear anything. So it's unfortunately a requirement, but it would be lovely to see all your faces and talk to you a bit more personally. If you do have any questions, as I said, as we go along, you can pop them into the Q&A box, which you should see if you hover along the bottom of your screen. There'll be a Q&A, you can pop it in there and we'll get to them at the end. We do also have a chat box, as previously mentioned. I see some of you are getting involved in it already, which is great. So be sure to let us know where you're tuning in from, say hi and get to know some more people in your heritage community. We are also recording this session, so that is so that we can refer back to it at a later date. And just so you know, we will be running similar sessions for other different funds and grant schemes throughout the year. But as this is the first scheme to come out for 2022, it's the first one that we'll be doing a clinic on. So any feedback as well is also welcomed. Feel free to email us. You can get me on vkelly@heritagecouncil.ie and I'll pop all that in at the end so you'll be able to see a bit more of the detail. So what's going to happen today? We're looking at about an hour running time, and Amanda will start us off by describing this particular grant. She'll discuss the different types of projects that we can and can't fund, who this particular grant is for, and also looking at some of the common pitfalls that you can come across in applying for a grant application. I'll then come back to your screens and I'll be talking to you a little bit about the Heritage Week events, and then we'll go back to Amanda, who will talk to you about acknowledging Heritage Council funding. We'll then go to our Q&A session, which is how we will finish out the afternoon. As I say, we're looking at it taking roughly an hour. So hopefully we will be able to get you going pretty soon. And I will just get Amanda over to talk to you. So just one moment here. So there's Amanda, if you want to take over.
Hi everyone, it's a bit surreal speaking to myself on a screen, but I can see all the lovely comments in the chat box. As Valerie said, thank you very much for attending. This is the first time that we've hosted such an event, so hopefully we won't stumble too badly, and we'll be delighted with any feedback afterwards. So I just have a short screen or PowerPoint presentation. It is very short. So I will be depending on you afterwards to ask lots of questions, and hopefully we can answer those as we go along. So I'm just going to share now. Okay, can everyone see that? Good. Oh no, sorry. So basically, this is the Heritage Capacity Fund 2022. This was what was called the Heritage Sector Support Scheme last year, so some of you would be familiar with it. The difference this year is that we're hoping to build capacity within heritage organisations, along with the normal keeping operations afloat. So last year it was really primarily just to look at organisations rolling out their existing programme, whereas this year we're looking to see, can you expand, bring on new projects or initiatives, and also roll out your existing programme. So just the key dates, we were open from the 25th, so the system is open now if you want to start your application, and it'll close on the 11th of January at 5 p.m. and that is a strict deadline. The system actually shuts down. So we have had horror stories in the past where people were about to press submit or were uploading that final document and the system just shut them out. So please be prepared in advance and don't leave it to the last minute. The overall funding this year is 1 million and a maximum of 50,000 per organisation. This year, I think the minimum grant was around 12,000 euros up to 50,000. The outcome will be notified to you at the end of February 2022, and you'll have until the 18th of November 2022 to get your paperwork and financials into us via the online system. Match funding, not applicable. Assessment, we will be screening applications as they come in, and that's really to see, do organisations meet the basic eligibility criteria. There will be an internal professional officer review. Then there will be an external panel assessment with scoring, and a recommended list will then be presented to our board for approval in February. I should say those assessment steps are a filtering process. So for instance, if you don't pass screening, you don't go on to internal professional officer assessment. Equally, if you don't pass that stage, your application doesn't go on to the external panel assessment. So I should say that some of this is direct cut and paste from the document, which I hope you've all read religiously. So just to summarise, basically we're looking for applications from not-for-profit, heritage-focused organisations with a demonstrated national relevance. And really the funding is to address core costs. And that would be like salaries, rents, rates, utilities, things like that, overheads. Also, we will look at projects, but they have to, usually that would be where it's also included with a budget for salary costs as well. Where we don't want to encourage applications is where a group is local, and while their work is super important, this is for organisations with a national relevance. We would encourage people who have project-specific ideas in mind to wait until our community grant scheme is advertised in January, and we will have a Zoom workshop as well, similar to this, to go through the types of projects. But anything that is project-specific, really, you should be looking at the Community Heritage Grant Scheme, not this scheme. And a number of organisations last year went to the trouble of applying for this scheme, and we were unable. Some of them had national relevance, but the way their budget was focused, we couldn't fund it because it was completely focused on projects and not the actual staff, or taking on board new staff to roll out their work plan. Examples of eligible costs, and they would be, as I just said, and also training programs, CPD courses, bursaries, things like that. Costs to help the organisation become more resilient, maybe to transition more digitally, training, skills and development costs. Also, which I haven't in there, would be if you want to engage somebody during next year to perhaps help with office management or something on those lines. Making your application. Before you start, I can't emphasize this enough, please read the application guidance documents. It's a template question form online. You must fill out all the questions and fill them out concisely. But what is important is page 6 and page 7 of the guidance document. And again, where applicants went down last year is they didn't look at that list and upload the supporting documents that are outlined. So I would actually suggest that you use those 2 pages as a template checklist and create your files on that basis. So for instance, we need background information on your organisation. That includes audited accounts. If you don't have audited accounts, accountant verified accounts will suffice. We need your constitution. We also need a statement of how your organisation is relevant nationally. If you go down through that list, there's points numbers 1 to 9. Every one of those are essential, and they are relevant to you, and you must upload them with your application. And the outcomes of your work plan, I would suggest that you use the template or the table on page 7 and use the column headings. You must show where the funded organisation will be more resilient. That's a mandatory outcome. So you can pick from the other outcomes listed, but I would suggest that you use that table as a template, save it and upload it. You must also demonstrate that you're willing to communicate and promote your work and the role of the Heritage Council. And you can do this by showing us your plans to reach newer audiences, provide your online activity stats. How many attendees had you at various programs this year, even if it was more than likely virtual events? We need kind of measurables. Assessors love images. I can't emphasize this enough. So anything, photographs that demonstrate the work that you're involved in, graphs, maps, if you're looking at habitat management, please provide images. They speak 1,000 words. This is general advice. Supporting documents, please save them in PDF and JPEG format. While the system will accept Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, what happens at assessment time is sometimes they don't open properly, or there can be delay in opening them, and it makes the whole process a lot smoother. You are guaranteed that your uploads will be with us if they're in those formats. Remember, maximum 10 megabytes per document. Not written here, but you're not limited to the amount of uploads. But I say that with caution. Please, what you need to concentrate is the list on page 6 and 7. And if you have all that documentation uploaded and possibly a few images, that should be enough. Name files relevant to the content. Don't use any kind of symbols in file names, as this may prevent. The documents will upload, but when it comes to assessment, they may not open for us successfully. All uploads will be checked for viruses. So when you upload a document, you will get a message saying, I think it's worded something like, this file is being checked for viruses. Don't panic. As the days get closer to the deadline, and particularly on the deadline date, that message may stay there for an hour, but that's only because traffic is so busy on the system. So don't panic. The documents are with us. We're just running precautionary checks. Start your application as soon as possible and save and upload documents as they become available. Again, leaving it the last day causes a lot of issues. And if you have any problems along the way with uploading documents or the online system in general, please do contact me. It's much easier for us to help you in advance than panic calls at 5 o'clock on the day. Traffic on the system on the final day could potentially slow down the process. So again, can't emphasize, start it as soon as possible and start getting your information up. You can go back and edit it, but at least get the bones together, and then it's just padding out after that. And then for contacting us, at the moment we are working remotely and will be doing so until at least January. So queries on the scheme can be directed to Valerie. And what we're going to do is create a frequently asked questions document, which will be more or less a live document. So as questions come in, we'll add to it, and that will be available on the Heritage Capacity Funding page of our website. So I hope you'll have lots of questions, and apologies. This is the busiest time of the year for us. We have grants, we have so many grants coming in, so many different schemes. So this was put together rather quickly. So apologies again if I stumbled a bit through it, but and it is our first time to do it. So hopefully you'll have a few questions that we can answer. And I'll pass over now to Valerie. Thanks, Valerie.
Thanks a million, Amanda. I'll just switch it over to Spotlight myself. Right, there I am. So thanks so much, Amanda. And what I'm going to talk about now is Heritage Week and running your Heritage Week event. And so I'm just going to start by sharing my screen. So bear with me one moment here. Okay, so you should be all able to see my slideshow here, which I will get started. So National Heritage Week is coordinated by the Heritage Council as part of European Heritage Days, a joint initiative of the Council of Europe and the European Union, in which more than 50 countries participate each year. Prior to 2020, National Heritage Week was very much events focused. However, with public health restrictions around social gatherings due to COVID-19, in 2020 and 2021, we had to adapt National Heritage Week and shift the focus more from events to projects. We worked with the heritage sector and community groups to support them in delivering an online celebration of heritage. The rate of participation absolutely exceeded our expectations. Over 850 creative heritage projects were uploaded to the Heritage Week website in 2020. And then in 2021, we saw an innovative blend of over 1,000 online projects and live outdoor events. So this really kept National Heritage Week as vibrant as ever. Online projects were really wide-ranging. We had talks, exhibitions, videos, podcasts, PowerPoint presentations, blogs, media coverage, dedicated websites and social media accounts. And then, of course, we also had some in-person, outdoor, socially distanced events. So looking at this year, here are the dates for National Heritage Week 2022. Now, I know August might seem like a very long time away, but planning begins in February, so we don't have a whole lot of time to sit on our laurels. All Heritage Council grantees are required to participate in National Heritage Week, so I cannot stress that enough. This will need to be factored into your work plan, and it's likely that the project element will be retained for next year so that organisers can do an online event or project or an in-person event to showcase their project. As part of National Heritage Week, there are also specific themes and set days for certain types of events and projects, so these are worth keeping in mind. We have Water Heritage Day, which is the second Sunday of National Heritage Week, and this is held in partnership with the local authority's Waters programme. And it's a day where we celebrate our lakes, canals, rivers, seas, wetlands, and most importantly, our connections with them. We also have Wild Child Day, which is usually held on the Wednesday of Heritage Week. And this is a day that's all about engaging children with nature. Organisers are asked to create events suitable for children and families on this day. We also have themes for our Heritage Week. The theme this year just gone was around inclusivity and reaching out to those who have never engaged in National Heritage Week before. Individuals who don't usually feel included in local heritage. So be they some of our newer communities or people with differing abilities, things like that. We also encourage organisers to include different age groups in their heritage projects. And this is a theme that we're going to be taking forward in years to come. And as you can see on the slide here, some of the categories that we had for National Heritage Week this year revolved around this. So we had our heritage newcomers, our heritage sharing, and our heritage for all ages. So those are things to keep in mind for that. So looking ahead to 2022, the theme announced by the Council of Europe's European Heritage Days is Sustainable Heritage. So keep that in mind when you're planning your Heritage Week event. It is likely to retain the project element that we introduced in 2020, and we're also still going to be looking at a hybrid mix of online and in-person events. And this is to facilitate issues around social distancing, whatever the public health guidelines might be at the time. And as well, it's also a really nice way to open up an event to more than just the people that are living directly in the community. So it's a really nice way to engage with the diaspora. So people don't need to physically be in the space to be part of the Heritage Week event. As long as you have an internet connection, you can dial in from anywhere in the world. So it's a wonderful way to really engage people with the heritage of their home, be it current or ancestral. As I said before, planning begins in February. So I know that seems like a little while away now, but once we get through Christmas, it's going to come flying around the corner. So with that, I'll leave you and I'll just say stay tuned for some announcements in spring of 2022. And I will pass you back over to Amanda, who is going to talk to you about acknowledging the funding.
Hi everyone again. We had lovely Martina, our social media guru, to give a presentation today, but unfortunately she was unable to, so I'm afraid I'm a poor replacement. I actually can't even find the presentation now that she sent us. But basically, it's really important. It's actually part of conditions of all our grants is that you must acknowledge our funding and promote your project. We have a document on our website. I'll put the link in the box now, and basically that's the guidelines that we ask people to follow. For this scheme particularly, we would be emphasising that we'd have a higher level of expectation in terms of acknowledging our funding and promoting your project. We will be looking for frequent posts on social media, for news alerts and e-zines, things like that, where you are trying to reach a greater audience, be more inclusive, while all the time promoting the funding that you are receiving from us. It's really important that that's done because it shows where public money is going to, all the great work that's been done, and it also helps us leverage funding going forward. We use these kind of measurables when we're putting in our bid to the department for increased funding each year. So the more activity or PR activity there is out there that the Heritage Council is involved in, the greater our chances are of increasing and expanding the types of grant programs that we can roll out. So as I said, I apologise, I had it saved to my desktop, but I can't locate it quickly. But it's basically the document that is available on our website. And if you are successful in receiving funding from us, our communications officer, who we're hoping to have a new position in 2022, will be in contact with you to work on a communications plan and to see how best to showcase the work that you're doing, whilst also getting our logo out there as well. So I think that's more or less it. And just to say, like, we are really proud to be associated with the projects, the programs that you're running. So it actually, aside from anything else, there's a great buzz factor when we see all this activity online, or we see the events that you're doing, and that we feel part of it as well. So thank you. And I think Valerie now is going to do the questions and answers. Valerie, just to say, there is a few questions in the chat box, so just not to miss those as well.
I'll try and make sure I get to both of them. So first of all, we have a question that says, I'm new to this process, so what does match funding not applicable mean?
Oh, well, that's basically a lot of grant funding, public funding, requires a minimum match funding. That means the applicant has to contribute. So, for instance, if your costs were 50,000 and our grant was 50,000, this is very theoretical, we could release funding of 50,000. You don't have to show that you spent more than 50,000 in order to, you have to show that your costs are 50,000, but that you didn't spend any more than that. I should also say, I think we might, this might be special to us in that we do acknowledge voluntary contribution, and we would ask you to put a cost on that, in terms of it's very good going forward as well for statistical sharing and measurables if you cost the voluntary contribution that you're giving. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay. The next one is, would this fund cover website development?
Theoretically, yes, but I would ask another question. What type of organization are you? Is that the only project or only thing you're applying for? If it is, please hold out for the community grant scheme, because we're actually going to include that in this year's scheme, or next year's scheme, I should say. So I hope that answers that question.
This next one is from somebody who's new to Ireland and is wondering if this grant is open to third-level university museums, for example, to help hire personnel to digitise museum specimens for an online database.
Interesting question, and I haven't got a clear yes or no answer, because theoretically not for profit, but project specific. I think I'll have to come back on that. I think maybe that will be something more towards our community grant scheme. We do have a lot of digitisation projects. Now, I do have to check, this year our community grant scheme was only opened to, when I say non-public, you had to be community voluntary group, not-for-profit heritage group, or a museum that was part of our museum standards program. So the likes of a third-level university couldn't apply to us. But there is, we have to look at the criteria for next year for the community grant scheme. And I certainly would be pushing that we open up a bit more to organisations like that, that are publicly funded but need to don't have core funding to roll out heritage type projects like that. So I will have to get back to you, Carla, on that one. We will come back.
Are quotes or estimates needed for application?
You have to produce a costed work plan. Mags, I'm not sure what organisation you are representing, but for this type of scheme, really quotes and estimates, unless there is specific projects within your plan that you want to fund, yes, if you could have a quote. But if you're applying for something, if your application is solely focused on a budget of quotes, then you're in the wrong scheme, because I said it's really about core funding to support staff costs to implement a heritage work plan, and that may include quotes to develop other areas where they need to bring in third-party expertise. But in general, it should be about core costs.
If you are unsuccessful at any point in the initial screening of the application, are you notified at that stage?
That's a very good question. I would say, and we did it this year, that those organisations, we tried to look at the applications coming in and discourage, it sounds terrible, discourage some applicants from applying, because we didn't want to waste their time. And from the information presented, it looked like a project-specific application from a group that would be eligible under the community grant scheme. So if you are screened out, because of the timescales next year, it definitely is something that we should do, and I'll bring that back to our internally, that's something that we will make a commitment to do, so that you have time to apply for the community grant scheme.
And is there a list of successful candidates from last year's scheme?
There is indeed. It's on our website. We have to publish this list every year, and we do so once the announcements are made, or I should say, once the most important thing about offers of funding is that the applicants are contacted first. So the outcomes are notified to the applicants, whether that is a negative outcome or a positive outcome. Then we issue press releases and publish the information on our website. So you can see last year's, the list of last year, or this year, I keep referring to, sorry, last year, this year. You can see the list of 2021 successful recipients on our current schemes page of our website. To look at the years previous to 2021, there's previously funded projects. The lists are there also.
Is it a problem if you're not as of yet registered as a not-for-profit?
Well, for this scheme, you have to have some kind of a constitution. So there is certain, you need to have some kind of framework around your body, whether that, this year, for instance, I know we funded a PPN group, and Valerie might be able to, that's the abbreviation for, what is this, public PPN, I have to, public, it's through the, I think it's, apologies for this, but basically they did have a constitution. They also, it's public participation network. They did have a working bank account or credit union account. They basically had a framework, constitution, governance set up for their group. And that's really the level of detail that we're looking for. If you, your application could also be put through the community grant scheme as well. We don't look for constituted, or what would you say, that type of framework for groups that apply to us through that. The one thing we do ask for at application is that you have a bank account or credit union account set up in the name of the organisation. That's for the community grant scheme. This particular scheme, we would be looking for a greater level of security in terms of the makeup, composition of your group, as I said, a constitution, a letter from a bank saying that you have a bank account, that kind of level of detail.
Can we apply for more than one grant for a couple of different projects?
Well, under this scheme, no, it's just one application per scheme. We would, if for instance, while we haven't said it on this scheme, if for instance you receive funding under this scheme and you come back then with applications for the community grant scheme, as I said, the criteria has still to be finalised for that. There may be, it did happen in a case this year where a group that is being funded this year through the Heritage Support Scheme had a number of applications under the community grant scheme. They weren't prioritised for funding. Our funding is quite limited, so we do try to spread funding around. So if you are thinking of applying, we'll say for the community grant scheme, you should incorporate the projects under one application rather than applying for multiple different projects. I hope that answers that question. I should say, oh, sorry to interrupt, Valerie. I should say, if I am in, this is difficult in that people can't come back to let me know whether I'm answering correctly. So if there is a case that I haven't answered your question, do pop a follow-up one in the questions and answers box again.
We have a question here now about how to show evidence for costs. So it says, if you have people on service contracts that look after particular work programs to achieve the goals of the organisation, do you need to see their invoices, or do we just outline the hours and hourly rate? And then there's a second part to this question. For a salary-based position, is it just the job description, including their work programme? And how should that evidence of these costs be presented?
Well, in terms of, there's, okay, if people have service contract, look for, I would say that should be included in your costed work plan. If you are awarded funding, we will be looking for other information in terms of proof of these costs. And this year, we are seeking most recent accounts and also letters of assurances signed by the finance person and the director of the organisation. I'd say maybe on that, for service client that look at particular work programs to achieve goals, yeah, that needs to go in your costed work plan. And if you feel you need to add further information, I would suggest maybe something like that, a letter of confirmation signed by your director, or just confirming that, you know, that the service contracts cost this much. If you feel that you need to add kind of additional supporting information. Second question, for salary-based position, is it just the job description, including their work program? I would say their work program, and also, again, that will be costed in your work plan for 2022. How should we show evidence of these costs? Again, if we don't actually ask for quotations, but we do ask for your accounts from the previous year, or your accountant signed accounts. So that will be the evidence there. And if it's something new that you're planning to take on this year, like a new position, provide the brief. Provide the, you know, that will be the job description, and also include it as a detail in your costed work program. And again, there's no harm in putting up a statement from including a statement from signed by your director to confirm that they're valid costs.
Okay, our next question is it clear on the balance in bids between existing core costs and new work, such as expansion of activities?
I'm a little confused by that. Is it clear on the balance in bids between, I'm not really sure what that question, existing core costs and new work reads. Is it clear on is what clear? Is it clear?
Yeah, I suppose, Chris, if you're still logged on with us, if you can pop another question in, and we'll hopefully get to it.
I suppose you, as the applicant, should clearly identify what is existing core programs and what new work or expansion of program is planned for 2022. And that would be very good, very helpful to your application. Excuse me.
And there's somebody wondering, is the scheme open to natural heritage NGOs such as wildlife organisation, not-for-profits?
Is it, yes, is the scheme now, unless I'm answering it incorrectly, not-for-profit, and is it open to natural heritage NGOs such as, yes.
Somebody is saying, we are a self-funded charity with no public funding. Would it cover equipment purchase or staff hire for a blended lecture delivery, for example, to live stream and record lectures and talks?
Oh, is that okay? Where is that question? Oh, here, sorry.
An anonymous question.
Yes, I need to read it. Sorry, I need to read it myself. Would it cover equipment purchase or staff hire for a blended lecture delivery, for example? From what you, from that question, I would think that sounds more like a community grant application, because we staff are, yes, this year I'm trying to think of examples. This year we covered the cost of extending contracts for existing part-time staff. We all staff hire, we are as a right there, staff. I have to think about that question, but it does sound more like a a community.
That's quite project based, isn't it?
Would it cover equipment purchase? Because we cover equipment purchase under community heritage or under the community grant scheme. We also cover delivery of lectures, live streaming, virtual events. So just from looking at the information you have given, I think it's more community based, but if you want to come back with a bit more detail, certainly I'll try and answer it a bit better. Sorry.
Do you have to spend the money before the grant is paid to the organisation?
You have to, you can do a couple of drawdowns a year. I think the maximum is about 3. We would, in terms of, we would need some kind of assurance, but actually for community type grant, not for profit, we do get a derogation, and we got one this year, and we'll be looking to the department for a derogation for next year, and that is to release funding based on third party costs without proof of payment. So we hope we'll have that in place again for 2022. Again, if it's core costs, you would have to present some kind of evidence that salaries have been paid. Whilst not actual pay slips, there would have to be some kind of maybe letter of assurance, again from the Director in Finance, to confirm the cost of the salaries to date. But for third party costs, no, we would pay out up to 30,000 without proof of payment, as long as we have that derogation from the department in place.
Would costs for training of staff and volunteers in traditional building conservation skills to maintain a site of national significance be deemed a project, or would it fit within this grant, as the skills could then be carried to other sites?
Okay, well, costs of training of staff and volunteers in traditional building conservation. That again could be a community heritage grant. I suppose it could fit into either. It also depends on your cost. The maximum funding this year under the community grant scheme was 15,000. So I would query like what costs are involved. It would be up, Laura, it would be, if you were looking to apply under the community or under this scheme, I suppose it would be up to you to make the case that it is of, you know, national relevance and that can be rolled out as a model or an exemplar. We did fund project or programs like this year under the current scheme. However, we do expect a lot more applications under the 2022 scheme. So I suppose the competition will be greater for funding, and we do have to look at those groups and programs that best meet the criteria of the scheme. I would be interested to know what the costs involved in that particular work plan are. As I said, if it is something, I would encourage it to go under the community grant scheme.
If an organisation takes on a salaried employee, what happens next year?
Yes, that's a good question. There is no guarantee of funding the following year. Our funding is not, unfortunately, multi-annual, so we have to advertise on an annual basis. We have to close off projects on an annual basis. So that would be something you would have to think about. I would suggest that if you are taking on someone to expand your programme, that it unfortunately would have to be on a contract basis.
Okay, and Una's wondering, what's the difference between the 2022 Heritage Capacity Fund and the separate Community Heritage Grant Scheme to be advertised in January? We are a volunteer-run MSPI status museum. Can we apply for both?
I would encourage Community Heritage Grant Scheme for UNA. This is, as I said, it's more about meeting the core costs of existing staff within the not-for-profit heritage sector. The voluntary museum, if you can make the case that it has national relevance, of course you can apply, and you must demonstrate that in that application. But if it's project specific, an MSPI would get a high priority status under our community heritage grant scheme. The difference in the schemes is one is very project specific, and it's usually looking at more local, while national outreach, it is local heritage and very project specific, start and finish point, whereas this is about supporting organisations that have a rolling work programme.
And we have a similar question here now from Watford Treasures. Should they apply to either the capacity scheme or the community scheme, not both, even if they've planned two related applications?
Rosemary, I'm not sure Watford Treasures would fit under the community capacity, in that Watford Treasures, now I could be incorrect on this, is part of the Watford local authorities. So that in itself would disqualify it. But 100% welcome to apply under the community grant scheme.
Okay. To clarify point 8 regarding double funding, that does not disqualify you for receiving funds from another government initiative, just that those funds can't cover the same costs under that scheme. Is this correct?
That is correct. And again, please outline that as a separate document in your application. Show us where you're getting funding from other other public bodies, what activity it's funding or what costs it's funding. Make it as clear as possible, so that there's a level of comfort for us in the assessment process that there is no danger of double funding from different agencies.
Okay. And we've had some clarifications on Chris's question earlier. Should we place a greater emphasis or spend on existing core activity or on new expanded activity?
Good question, Chris. Well, the maximum funding we can offer is 50,000. Last year, the average grant, I think, was kind of in the region of 20 to 30,000. So be realistic as well in what you can achieve within the time scale. It is only March to November. That's the time scale our grant funding will operate through. I would definitely, I wouldn't really put greater emphasis on either. I would highlight both. It's great to see new expanded activities, but I suppose you have to demonstrate that you would be able to deliver both if funded, and be realistic in the ask as well.
Okay, and will submitted audited accounts be from 2020 or 2021? I assume 2020, as 2021 would not be completed by January 2022. It's a lot of numbers.
Oh yes, it would be 2020. Now, sometimes they're not even ready. So I suppose the most, if not the accountant verified accounts, will suffice, but your most recent, I suppose, is if you haven't got your audited accounts for 2022, your most recent audited accounts, that will be 2019, and also if you could provide your accountant, your most recent accountant verified accounts. Sorry, it is quite a mouthful. Yeah, I hope that answers that question.
I'm just scanning through the chat box here. There's a question. Does this application consider covering costs of a core membership cost? So I wonder, is that kind of like similar to how you pay into the Wall Towns network or memberships to different programs?
That I would have to come back to you on. I'm not sure. I'd imagine just now, this is just off the top of my head, it probably wouldn't be the highest priority under the scheme.
We had a question, can staff pilot positions be submitted?
So when you say staff pilot positions, is that, what's a staff pilot position? Is that like a new, taking on board a new staff to pilot a program? Or I'm sorry, I don't really know.
Not sure, yeah. Brian, if you can clarify that in the chat box, and we'll hopefully get to it in time. And while you're typing that in, we had not a question but a statement from Elaine saying, I would like to acknowledge how important it is for NGOs to receive funding for core costs, especially in enabling us to follow our core mission and not drift in order to access funding sources. We greatly appreciate the opportunity this stream of funding represents in supporting the diverse heritage work taking place across the country. I think that's so lovely to hear as well, and it just makes what we do really worthwhile. No message coming back from Brian there. I think I've got everyone's message in, oh, there he is. Looking to develop a new position but want to establish need for this, hence a pilot position. So I suppose putting someone into a temporary role to establish that it is actually needed to show the role.
You would have to make a strong case, Brian. So I get, yes, it would really be back at you to make the strong case. There's an element of doubt there, and there would have to be a level of comfort for our organisation to offer funding. So I think maybe we could explore that a bit more, Brian. I'm not sure what organisation you're contacting us from. So if you want to contact me directly at aryan@heritagecouncil.ie, I'll certainly get a more informed response for you, and we can add that to our frequently asked questions if it's something that would impact on others. I should say, in terms of to alleviate any confusion about the types of organisations that can apply for this funding, the organisation that applies to us for funding is going to be our payee. If our payee then transpires to be a local authority or a other publicly funded body, then you are not eligible to apply. The applicant organisation must be the payee, and that means that we are paying a not-for-profit organisation, heritage organisation, I should say. I hope that's a little bit clearer.
I think we're coming to the end of our questions now. Somebody has asked if funding can be got for a famine graveyard. I would imagine the best practice there is to contact your local authority heritage officer and make sure that they're aware of it, and they'll be able to direct you in what area, but that seems like more of a community scheme, doesn't it?
It does, yes, absolutely, yes, yes.
Okay, great. Other than that, it just seems to be a lot of lovely comments coming in from you all, thanking us for funding down through the years, and yeah, all seems really great. Somebody had asked if the information from this would be available online. We are recording, and I do see we've had one more question come in here that I'll just get to quickly, and then we're going to have to call it a day. We are a volunteer-run museum with FÁS and TUS support. We'd love to create a part-time or full-time paid role for a museum manager. Is there a possibility in this funding?
That's a difficult question, because I suppose long-term then, what happens if funding isn't available the following year? I'd imagine under this scheme that may be a low priority, because you take on a person, then what happens to the programme they're working on, if the funding then, how does it sustain itself long term if it's dependent on one source of funding from ourselves going forward, and our funding isn't guaranteed from year to year. So honestly, it would be a lower priority.
Yeah, so I guess that's us for today, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much, Amanda, for giving us so much information and for answering all the questions so diligently. We will have the information from this available online. We have been recording this, so long as my internet connection holds up, which you never know, rural Ireland and all that, we will hopefully have this up on YouTube as soon as possible. If you do feel like one of the other grant schemes is more suitable for your project or your organization, definitely keep an eye on our social media, because we will be doing more of these sessions for each grant scheme. And yeah, we'll be advertising them on there. Any questions in the meantime, you have my email address that you should have gotten through your registration for this. If you don't have it, it's vkelly@heritagecouncil.ie. Or you can just find any of us through the Heritage Council About Us, our team section on the website. You'll get our email contacts there. Lovely to speak one way to you today. Sorry, it couldn't be more of a two-way conversation. But yeah, I suppose from Amanda and myself, we're just like, thank you all for coming. Thank you for taking your time. And we'll see you in grant applications.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Talk to you again soon. Bye. Take care.